Step right up, step right up. Tonight, we are heading back to a place that once lit up Chicago with screaming coasters, flashing lights, and the kind of thrills that blurred the line between fun and fear. This was Riverview Park, home to some of the most intense rides in the country. Wild midway attractions and stories that didn't always end when the ride stopped. Because behind the laughter, behind the crowds, there were moments that turned deadly and memories that may have never left. This is Death Kiss Traveler, the only podcast that dives into the horror, hauntings, and history at amusement parks. My name is Marissa, your morbidly curious host. Today's episode is the full ride, history, horror, and hauntings all in one. And if you enjoy today's episode, do me a quick favor, hit that follow button so you never miss what's coming next. And if you've got a second, leave a 5-star rating. Seriously, those ratings are like gold for podcasters, and they help push the show out to more people and keep this whole thing growing. I can't believe how much it has grown in the last 7 months of doing this. I appreciate all of your support. Thank you, thank you. All your support tells me that you are loving these stories, which means I'll keep digging up even more wild, creepy, and unbelievable ones for you. I appreciate it more than you know. All right, buckle up, because what we are about to get into, it's a little darker, a little stranger, and way creepy. Before there were roller coasters ripping through the sky, before the bobs, before neon lights and cotton candy, before first kisses on the Midway, there was just a riverbank. In the mid to late 1800s, that land that would become Riverview Park sat along the north branch of Chicago River on what was then the edge of the city. And I mean edge. Chicago in the 1800s was expanding fast. Railroads, stockyards, factories. But this stretch of land near Belmont and Western wasn't screaming industry yet. It was green, open and breezy, and it started as a picnic ground and a pleasure garden, the kind of place immigrant families would gather on Sundays. Beer gardens, music, boating, community events. Think less theme park and more let's escape the soot and the noise of the city for a few hours. In the 1870s and 1880s, leisure culture was exploding. The people of Chicago were working brutal hours in factories, and places like this offered something radical for the time: recreation, fresh air, laughter, a break. By the 1890s, amusement parks were starting to pop up across America. Inspired by World's Fairs and electric illumination displays, electricity itself was entertainment. Lights glowing at night felt futuristic, almost magical. The land that would become Riverview changed hands a few times during this era, gradually evolving from informal picnic space into something more organized, something more commercial. That land held laughter long before it held the screams. Sometimes the earliest spirits aren't the tragic ones. Sometimes they're just echoes of Sunday picnics, brass bands, and the hum of a growing city that didn't yet know it was about to build one of the greatest amusement parks in American history. And Riverview didn't start because someone had a sweet childhood dream of building roller coasters. That was my childhood dream. I played way too much Roller Coaster Tycoon. Maybe that's where I started with all of this. But Riverview started because Chicago was tired. By the late 1800s, this city was grinding. Railroads, stockyards, smoke, and just noise. People worked brutal hours trying to survive, and when you work 10 to 12 hours a day in a factory, you don't want philosophy, you want fun. And I love that, because in the early 1900s, everyone thought they needed an amusement park to lift their spirits. Because it does. Think about now, when you want to get away, Disney or Universal, they are calling your name. Then came the turn of the century, and this is where things get interesting. America was becoming obsessed with amusement parks. Electricity had just become the new cool toy. Light bulbs weren't boring, they were magical. Entire parks lit up at night, feeling futuristic and slightly unhinged in the best way. And the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, that changed everything. It showed people that the crowds would absolutely pay to be dazzled. So the Schmidt family looked at that riverfront land and basically said, oh, we can monetize on this. In 1904, they officially opened Riverview Park. They didn't just open a park, they opened a release valve. Admission was free. That was the hook. You only paid for the rides, which meant anyone could walk in. Rich, poor, immigrant, teenagers with exactly 17 cents in their pocket. Everyone mixed together under glowing lights. It wasn't just rides at first. It was spectacle, music, mechanical oddities, early thrill rides that were basically wooden structures daring gravity to fight back. And Chicago, it showed up. Because what Riverview understood from day one was people don't just want entertainment, they want escape. They want to feel something bigger than their shift at a factory, bigger than their tiny apartment, bigger than the noise of the city. And Riverview gave them that. It became a place where you went on your first date. You proved you weren't scared of the big coaster. You got your heart broken. You kissed someone under electric lights that felt like the future. And all of that grew out of a patch of riverbank where people once just brought sandwiches and beer. The laughter came first. The screams came later. And for over 60 years, that land held both. Okay, picture 1904. No lap bars the way we know them. No computer testing. No corporate safety video telling you to keep your arms inside the vehicle. Just wood, steel, and nerve, and vibes. When Riverview Park opened, it didn't start with a massive mega coasters. It started with what is considered cutting-edge chaos for the 1900s. Let me set the scene. It's 1904. Riverview Park opens, and right away people are lining up for one thing. A figure-8 roller coaster that looks sweet and innocent until you realized it basically was a wooden skeleton trusting gravity to do its job. No seatbelts, no smooth buttery track, you, a lap bar, and maybe a whole lot of faith. Those early coasters weren't massive yet, but for 1904, they were chaos in the best way. You'd climb up, dip down, rattle your bones a little, and step off with your hat crooked and your heart racing. And people were obsessed because this was just the beginning of something new. The idea of choosing to be scared, that wasn't normal yet. Thrill-seeking wasn't a personality trait. It was a wild, brand new experience. And we have to talk about some of these early rides, totally unhinged in the best way. First up, Shoot the Chutes. Talk about drama. Shoot the Chutes was basically the main character of early Riverview. You'd step into this flat-bottom boat, slowly get dragged up this towering ramp, and then whoosh, straight down into a massive splash like you just starred in a Victorian action movie. It was loud, it was messy, people got soaked, and everyone screamed. And in a city sitting right along the Chicago River, a water spectacle like that just hit different. This was a popular ride for this era, and basically it's how we got the log flume. Of course, Riverview wasn't just about fear, it was about vibes, and the Midway didn't disappoint. You had a carousel with beautifully carved horses that almost felt alive. Early Ferris wheels lifting you up and over the skyline. Fun houses that were less fun and more, what is happening right now? But it wasn't just the rides, it was the energy. Music playing everywhere. Lights glowing, vendors yelling, the smell of popcorn mixing with that damp river air. It felt alive. These parks weren't built to scare you, they were built to dazzle you. Electric lights alone were enough to blow people's minds. Imagine walking into Riverview at night for the first time. Everything glowing, buzzing, alive. For a lot of people, especially immigrant families, this was their first glimpse of something that felt futuristic. It wasn't just a park, it was magic. Mechanical, glowing, slightly chaotic magic. But enter the golden age of chaos. By the 1910s and roaring into the 1920s, everything changed. Bigger, faster, higher, louder. Cities were competing. Parks were competing, and Riverview decided it wasn't just going to keep up, it was going to dominate. And here comes roller coaster legend John A. Miller, the guy who basically invented modern coaster designs. He created the safety wheels that keeps the train locked onto one track, which is honestly comforting considering what they were building. And you have to wonder what they were using before the modern design came out. That's terrifying. No wonder there were so many accidents. We have talked about him before. I think it was in a lagoon episode, Lagoon in Farmington, Utah. We talked about him. He designed the wooden roller coaster there as well. He designed roller coasters all over the nation. So thank you, John A. Miller, for creating fun and safe chaos for everyone. In 1924, a ride came out called the Bobs. If early Riverview was an, "Aw, that's fun," the Bobs was, "Hold on to your soul." This thing didn't glide, it attacked. It twisted, dropped, roaring through the track like it had something to prove. It was fast, aggressive, and completely unapologetic. People didn't just ride the Bobs, they survived it. It became a rite of passage. If you were a Chicago teen, riding the Bobs meant three things. You were brave, you were reckless, and you were trying to impress someone, but probably all three. At one point, Riverview had 7 roller coasters running at the same time. 7, not spaced out like today's parks where everything feels neat and planned. No, these were packed in tight, wood on wood on wood. Tracks twisting over each other, diving under each other, just like a tangled jungle of pure chaos. From above, it looked insane. From inside, it felt even crazier. And Riverview didn't stop. They kept building more coasters, bigger structures, wood stacked on wood, until the skyline of the park looked like a chaotic forest of tracks. You could hear the chains pulling cars up the lift from blocks away. That slow clack, 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 building tension before the drop. And that sound, that was just the beginning. And in the 1920s, admission was still free. Yeah, you could really just walk off of Belmont Avenue and boom, you're dropped into a world of screaming coaster trains, glowing lights, and pure mechanical chaos. No gates, no wristbands, no barcode scanners. Wouldn't that be nice? It was just noise, adrenaline, and full-on Chicago energy. By the 1930s through the 1950s, Riverview wasn't just a park, it was the place. Everyone wanted to go. Teenagers lied to their parents about being there. Workers blew entire paychecks there in a single night. It was messy, it was magical, a little reckless, and completely alive. This wasn't a park trying to feel safe. It was trying to feel unforgettable. And honestly, it nailed it. But this is Death Kiss Traveler, and this is the part that they didn't put on the postcards. Because yeah, people died at Riverview Park. Not all at once, not some massive disaster, but over 63 years, there were multiple fatal accidents. From what I can find, there are 16 fatal accidents that happened at Riverview Park. But back then, historical records are a little murky, so that number could have been way up there. Early wooden coasters were a different world. No secure lap bars like today, sometimes just a simple bar, sometimes barely that. Sometimes they had, and riders, they could stand up. And they did. If you have listened to my podcast, those 1900s wooden coasters were sketchy, and so many people died because they could stand up, move around. I actually want to hear about the survivors that had near-death experiences on those rides, because wooden coasters were the wild west of early theme parks. Newspapers reported victims trying to shift seats or stand up just as the coaster dropped. Today it sounds impossible, but back then, thrill culture was just bold, reckless, and still figuring itself out. Digging through the old archives for this episode, I found a lot of reports from the Chicago Tribune on June 23rd, 1919. At Riverview Park, a thrill ride turned deadly. R.N. Eldred, a restaurant owner visiting from Flint, Michigan, climbed aboard the Blue Streak, one of the park's fastest, most unforgiving coasters. Somewhere near the top, everything was still, and the train dropped. Witnesses say Eldred stood up as the car plunged down its steepest hill, a split-second decision on a ride that gave you none to spare. He lost his balance and fell 50 feet from a moving coaster. Park employees later confirmed what everyone feared. What was supposed to be the night of excitement ended in tragedy. A stark reminder that at Riverview, the line between thrill and danger was razor thin. Then in 1932, a teenage boy stands up mid-ride, just for a second, and he falls from the train and is killed. No derailment, no collapse, just gravity doing what gravity does. And that became the pattern. I don't have a lot of information on this 1932 accident, but it is reported that a teenage boy did die. And it's important because he wasn't the first. In July 3rd of 1935, another summer night at Riverview Park, lights glowing, music playing, the Big Dipper roaring overhead, and then just in an instant, everything changed. Miss Jane Ruby, just 23 years old, climbed into a car with two sisters, Marie and Helen Slota, 3 riders, 1 seat, and the train crept to the top of the steep incline. There's that moment every rider knows, the pause right before the drop. But Jane never made it down. Somewhere at the peak, she toppled out, falling 30 feet to the ground below. Park visitors rushed her to St. Elizabeth Hospital, but she never made it. Officials couldn't fully explain what happened. Some said she had ignored the ride operator's warning that she shouldn't have been in that seat at all. 3 people was too much. The next day, on July 4th, 1935, a hearing was held. Witnesses confirmed it, 3 girls in a single seat, despite attempts to separate them. In the end, her death was ruled an accident. But at Riverview, accidents like this weren't just rare tragedies. They were part of the risk you took the moment that safety bar clicked into place. And just weeks later, according to the Chicago Tribune, on August 27, 1935, it happened again. Same park, same ride, the Big Dipper. Leroy Kubitschek, 20 years old, climbed aboard the coaster at Riverview, chasing the same rush thousands came for every night. Beside him was his friend Frank O'Grady. They made it to the top of the climb, higher and higher, until the train reached the top of the incline. That quiet moment before the drop, but instead of bracing, Leroy stood up, waving his arms, shouting into the night, completely ignoring the warnings every rider is given. Maybe they didn't give him back then, but the train dropped and in an instant, he lost his balance and fell 30 feet from the moving train. He didn't survive. It was the same coaster, same kind of fall as before. So Riverview tried to say that he just fell out. But there's the part that you don't forget. The part told by the person who was right there sitting next to him. Right next to him was his friend, Frank O'Grady, and his story is tragic. Quote, "The car jerked forward, and as we came to the top of the 3rd peak, he just flew out. That's all." End quote. No buildup, no warning. He wasn't standing up, according to his friend. Quote, "He was holding the bar with both hands, and even after his body flipped a full somersault, he was still hanging there, dangling in front of the car." End quote. For a moment he didn't fall. He was suspended between life and what comes next. O'Grady said, quote, "That's how his arms broke. I grabbed his trousers. I tried pulling him back in. I nearly tore off my own arm in trying." End quote. but he couldn't hold him. And then he was gone. Park officials tried to explain it, tried to reassure the public, inspections, safety checks, weeks spent going over every ride before the season even began. They pointed out something else too. The problem wasn't the rides, it was the riders. Young men, ages 16 to 22, the ones who pushed the limits, who ignored the rules, who turned a little thrill into something else entirely. They blamed the person sitting right there in that roller coaster seat. And by the mid-1930s, more deaths followed. Same story, different night. Riders standing, leaning, moving seats mid-ride. That's it. We don't know all the details. The history does not tell us all the details. Okay, fast forward to May 26, 1962. A 36-year-old city worker was killed late Friday after standing up and falling from the Bob's roller coaster. He was then struck by the train behind him. Police identified the victim as Vincent Perry, an employee in the city's water distribution department. The accident happened around 11:20 p.m. Just as light rain began to fall, witnesses said that Perry was riding alone in the 10th car of an 11-car train. He stood up as the coaster reached the top of a 25-foot curve. According to those nearby, Perry appeared to wave to his 24-year-old wife, Patricia, who was watching from the ground. Just as the train began its descent, in that moment, he was thrown from the car and onto the tracks. The following train car crested the hill behind him and struck him as it began its own descent. His wife and other witnesses screamed as the scene unfolded. Perry was pronounced dead at the scene, and police believed he had somehow slipped out from under the safety bar designed to keep riders seated. A city inspector, Warren Johnson, examined both the train and the car involved and reported that the ride was in perfect working condition. The tragedy echoed a similar incident less than a year earlier. A 24-year-old man from Des Plaines also died after standing up on another coaster, the Fireball. In the Chicago Tribune report, it says, despite these incidents, Riverview, then in its 59th season after opening on May 11th, welcomed more than 2 million visitors annually and had been recognized by the National Safety Council as one of the safest amusement parks in the world. Here's the thing that actually kind of surprises me, is Riverview wasn't known for its massive ride failures. No huge collapses, no single defining disaster. Most of the deaths came down to standing up mid-ride, leaning out too far, switching seats, ignoring warnings. It was just a different era where thrill and bravado kind of blurred together. And in a park full of teenagers trying to impress each other, that line got dangerous real fast. I wish I could tell you about all of the accidents, but we don't have time for that. And also, the history, like I said, it's a little blurred, but these are the most famous ones. Okay, now we have to talk about some of the people that worked there, because the most unusual attractions could be found inside the Palace of Wonders, later known as the Freak Show. Owned by Ray Marsh Bryden, crowds gathered to gawk at the tattooed lady, a contortionist, a sword swallower, a fire eater, and the infamous human blockhead who would hammer nails into his nose. One of the most talked about acts was the Two-Faced Man, advertised on banners as having two completely separate faces. In reality, he only had one face. One side appeared typical, the other side was severely deformed. The tattooed lady, well, she was covered head to toe in ink, which was shocking for the time because tattoos were rare and very taboo, especially on women. There were employees who practically lived at the park. Some concession workers, game operators, and maintenance staff spent decades there. Many came from nearby neighborhoods and treated Riverview like a second home. Kids who visited the park often grew up to work there themselves. It became a generational workplace. The Barkers were the voices of Riverview. They stood outside of attractions, shouting things like, "Step right up, See what no one else can show you. Their job was to pull people in using exaggeration, mystery, and sometimes outright deception. The more outrageous the pitch, the better the crowd. Come on over and see the woman with 3 heads. Some barkers became minor celebrities because of how entertaining or aggressive they were. And one famous person that we all know and love, Walt Disney. This is where he got his start in theme parks, was working at Riverview. That's kind of a fun fact. By the 1950s and into the 1960s, Chicago wasn't the same city anymore. Neighborhoods were shifting, families were moving out, highways were cutting through communities, and suddenly people weren't looking for entertainment the same way. Because now you could just stay home and watch TV. And amusement parks all across the country started to feel it. Riverview wasn't immune. It wasn't this separate little world. It was right in the middle of a city that was evolving fast. Riverview had always prided itself on being open to everyone. Free admission meant anyone could walk in. It didn't matter your income. You could be a part of it. That was the magic. But the country around it was going through something much bigger. As Chicago's neighborhoods became more diverse, so did the crowds at Riverview. And that should have been a beautiful thing. But remember, this is the 1960s we're talking about, a time of civil rights protests, housing discrimination, deep, complicated social change. So naturally, those tensions didn't stay outside the park gates. They showed up inside. Now, I need to be really clear here. There is no solid evidence that Riverview closed because of integration. But there were documented moments of conflict in the park during that time. And that wasn't unique to Riverview. It was happening in cities all across America. Because this wasn't just about a park, this was about a country trying to figure out itself. And then comes the part no one likes to talk about. Because it's not dramatic, it's not spooky, it's just business. The land became more valuable than the park. By the mid-1960s, that massive 70-plus acre space at Belmont and Western was worth a fortune. Shopping centers, parking lots, commercial development, those things made steady, predictable money. Roller coasters, not so much. Wooden rides needed constant repair. Insurance costs, well, they were climbing, and families were starting to head out to newer parks in the suburbs. From a business standpoint, the writing was on the wall. And then in 1967, the Schmidt family sold the land. And just like that, no fire, no massive disaster, no dramatic final day where everything went wrong. Just a quiet decision that this place, this chaotic, electric, unforgettable place, wasn't the future anymore. When the owners decided to sell the land in 1967, there wasn't a slow fade or years of decline. It closed. And then demolition started. The giant wooden coasters that had dominated the skylines for generations were torn down piece by piece. The only ride to survive demolition was the carousel, which was moved to Six Flags over Georgia. Within months, most of the park was gone. Imagine growing up in Chicago, seeing those massive wooden structures your entire life, and then suddenly driving by, and they're just not there anymore. That sudden disappearance is why Riverview still feels haunted to a lot of locals. Not because of paranormal stories, but because of something that big, something that important to people's childhood just vanished. And that's when the story started, because this place was built on energy. And when you take that away, well, that's when the ghost stories start being told. Riverview Park may be gone, but the stories about it never really left. While there's no official haunted attraction like you'd find in modern parks, a handful of eerie legends have been passed down, mostly tied to those tragic accidents, the intensity of the rides, and the park's chaotic energy. Here are the most talked about ghost stories connected to Riverview. Back to the Bobs, one of the most intense wooden coasters ever built, and also one of the most feared. After fatal accidents like the Vincent Perry in 1962, workers reportedly felt uneasy operating the ride at night. Some employees claimed they heard screams when the trains were empty or felt sudden cold spots near the final dips. There are also whispers that operators occasionally saw a figure sitting alone in a car, only for the seat to be empty when the train returned. Same with the Fireball. After the 1961 accident, workers and guests saw someone sitting in the front seat, only to be gone when the train returned. And remember the Palace of Wonders? The freak show that already blurred the line between curiosity and discomfort. There are stories that are tied to it. Workers claim they heard movement inside the building after closing, footsteps, dragging sounds, or quiet voices. Some believe they are the spirits of performers, many of whom who had hard lives. They never really left. That was their happy place. The space reportedly had a heavy feeling, especially when empty. And long after the Riverview Park closed its gates for the final time, the noises never fully disappeared. At least that's what people say. On certain nights when the air is still and the streets are quiet, neighborhoods calm, they can hear it. Faint at first, a distant melody drifting through the dark, carousel music, the kind that once echoed through the Midway, bright and cheerful in the daylight, now hollowed and misplaced in the silence. Some people stop and listen, others walk faster, because it's not just the sound, there's a feeling too. A strange, heavy nostalgia that settles in your chest, like standing in a place that's supposed to be empty, but somehow it's not. As if something busy and alive once filled every inch of that ground, and maybe in some way it still does. And then there are the nights when it's the strongest, when the music feels closer, when the air seems charged, when people swear just for a moment they can feel it again. The hum of crowds, the rattle of wooden coasters, a distant laughter, like Riverview Park is still there, still operating, just beyond what you can see. And just like that, the lights of Riverview fade out one last time. What once was a place filled with laughter, screams, music, and motion now exists only in stories, old photographs, and maybe something more. Because even though the rides are gone, even though the Midway is silent, some people still swear Riverview never truly closed. Maybe it's just a memory. Maybe it's imagination. Or maybe on certain nights when the air is just right, the past doesn't stay in the past. Maybe it lingers, waiting. So the next time you find yourself in a place where something once stood, listen closely. You might hear it. The distant rattle of a coaster, the faint echo of carnival music, or the sound of something that never really left. Thank you for listening to Death Kiss Traveler. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to follow and leave a 5-star review and share it with someone who loves a good ghost story. Because the more you listen, the more places like this come back to life. I'll see you next week. This podcast is written and researched by me, Marissa, produced by Sunkissed Traveler Travel Agency. Are you thinking of a vacation? See show notes for details or visit sun-kissedtraveler.com for a free quote.